You think strength comes from accumulating more wealth, more possessions, more status symbols. But what if I told you that the most feared man in ancient Athens owned nothing but a cloak and lived in a barrel? Diogenes the Cynic possessed a power so terrifying to rulers that Alexander the Great himself bowed before this beggar. Today, we decode why living simply isn't weakness. It's the ultimate strategic advantage that makes you untouchable. Let me tell you something that most people will never understand. Simplicity is not peace. It's not calmness. It's war. A war against everything that tries to own you. The world you live in today is built to trap you in comfort, to make you a consumer, not a commander of your life. Every advertisement, every piece of luxury, every digital distraction is whispering the same thing. You are incomplete without me, and that is the first chain. When Diogenes walked barefoot through Athens, wearing rags, holding only a cup, he was doing something radical. He was not trying to escape the world. He was declaring war on it. He looked around and saw everyone enslaved by their gold, by their appetites, by their need to be admired. And so he chose the only real form of freedoms, to want nothing. He threw away his cup when he saw a child drink from his hands. That moment wasn't about poverty. It was about dominance. Because when you strip away what you don't need, you strip away what controls you. Machiavelli would have admired this, because power is never given to the man who is desperate. Power comes to the one who stands apart, who cannot be bribed, who cannot be swayed by comfort or fear. The man who depends least upon fortune commands it most. And Diogenes was that man, a ruler of himself. When you look at modern life, it's no different. People chase luxury cars, designer clothes, and constant validation, thinking these things give them power. But what they don't see is that they have simply built a golden cage. They are still prisoners, only now the walls are decorated with luxury. Simplicity is rebellion because it breaks the invisible leash the world places around your neck. The moment you stop needing approval, you stop dancing for others. The moment you stop chasing possessions, you stop being possessed. When Diogenes stood in front of Alexander the Great, the ruler of the known world, and told him to move aside because he was blocking the sunlight, he wasn't being foolish. He was demonstrating the highest form of dominance. Because Alexander could conquer cities, but Diogenes had conquered desire itself. The truth is, when you live simply, you terrify people. You remind them of how fragile their comfort really is. They laugh at you because they envy you. They call you crazy because they know you're free. That's why the crowd mocked Diogenes. Not because they didn't understand him, but because they secretly wished they could be him. They wished they could wake up one morning and not be owned by bills, opinions, or expectations. But they can't, because they've mistaken slavery for success. To live simply in a world built on greed is the ultimate rebellion. It's saying no to the system that profits from your insecurity. It's walking away from the game instead of trying to win it. Machiavelli would see this as the deepest strategic move, because the less you rely on others, the less they can use you. When you simplify your life, you remove leverage from your enemies. You become unpredictable, self-sufficient, dangerous. Simplicity is not weakness, it's control. It's the ability to say, I can live with less and still remain powerful. Every powerful figure throughout history had to learn this lesson. Kings who became addicted to luxury lost their thrones. Warriors who grew too comfortable lost their strength. Entire empires crumbled because their rulers forgot the discipline that built their power in the first place. Diogenes understood this instinctively. He was poor by appearance but rich in will. He had no army, yet he ruled over his own nature, something most kings could never do. When you begin to simplify, everything changes. You stop competing with others and start mastering yourself. You stop needing to prove, to impress, to please. Your value becomes internal, not based on what you have, but who you are when everything is taken away. And that's where real confidence begins, not from luxury, but from liberation. Simplicity doesn't mean you reject ambition or goals. It means you remove everything that weakens your focus. It's not about living without, it's about living beyond. Beyond attachment, beyond dependence, beyond fear. And once you reach that level, when you no longer need what others crave, you become untouchable. Because how can the world control a man who has already let go? When Diogenes walked through the marketplace, he would laugh at people buying things they didn't need. He saw them chasing comfort, while he was chasing clarity. And that's the paradox. The man who had nothing enjoyed more peace than those who had everything, because he understood what Machiavelli would later teach rulers and princes alike. If you are not in control of your desires, someone else is. Simplicity is rebellion. It is psychological warfare against a world that thrives on distraction. It's a strategic act of withdrawal, not from life, but from illusion. When you no longer need the world's approval, you start to see it clearly. And when you see clearly, you act with precision. You speak less. You move with purpose. You stop being a pawn and start becoming the player. Every empire in history began with struggle and ended in comfort. The pattern never fails. The moment people start chasing comfort instead of control, they begin to rot from within. And that's exactly what Diogenes understood. He saw that comfort wasn't pleasure, it was poison. A slow, sweet poison that weakens your will, dulls your instincts, and makes you dependent on things that once meant nothing. When you strip away all the illusions, comfort is the silent killer of greatness. It disguises itself as peace, as success, as reward. But in truth, it is surrender. Machiavelli would say, a prince must learn to live with hardship, for fortune favors the disciplined. Diogenes lived that truth to the extreme. While men built palaces, he slept under the stars. While others feasted, he ate what little nature offered. He didn't do it out of misery. He did it to stay dangerous. Because when you can endure discomfort, you own your life. But when you avoid it, life owns you. Think about it. Every time you seek comfort, you trade strength for softness. You choose ease over evolution. Comfort makes you predictable, dependent, and ultimately weak. Look at modern life: heated homes, soft beds, endless entertainment, food on demand. We've become slaves to convenience. We cannot bear silence. We cannot bear hunger. We cannot bear discomfort. And so, our minds have grown fragile. We panic at the slightest inconvenience, as if the smallest struggle is injustice. Diogenes would laugh at us, not out of cruelty, but because he saw the trap that catches every generation, that confuses comfort for power. Power is born in discomfort. It's forged in struggle, in resistance, in the cold moments when you stand alone and refuse to give up. The men and women who rule their own lives are those who can tolerate the heat of pressure and the chill of solitude. Diogenes made discomfort his companion, not his enemy. He would sleep on the ground to train his mind to detach from luxury. He would walk barefoot, exposing himself to the elements, to remind himself that nature owes him nothing. And that was his secret. He didn't need comfort because he was stronger than it. Machiavelli would have seen this as a political principle. A ruler who indulges too much loses the respect of his people. Once a man is consumed by pleasure, he becomes easy to control. Offer him a little more comfort, a little more praise, and he will do anything to keep it. The same applies to modern life. The system doesn't control you through fear anymore. It controls you through comfort. It seduces you. It tells you, you've earned it. You deserve to relax. You don't need to push harder. But that voice isn't your ally. That voice is your enemy, dressed as a friend. When Diogenes walked through the luxurious streets of Athens, surrounded by marble and gold, he wasn't impressed. He saw weakness hidden beneath the wealth. He saw men afraid to lose what they had, and that fear made them slaves. Fear of losing comfort turns kings into cowards. It turns warriors into watchers. The man who depends on comfort will always kneel before the one who can live without it. That's why Diogenes was free. Not because he lacked possessions, but because he didn't fear losing them. Comfort numbs your ambition. It whispers to you that you've done enough, that you don't need to go further. But Diogenes knew that growth begins where comfort ends. When he chose to live in a barrel, it wasn't because he wanted pity. It was because he wanted mastery. He wanted to prove that the human spirit could rise above need, that no possession, no luxury, no comfort could ever define strength. And he succeeded, because history still speaks his name while the rich men of his time are forgotten. Machiavelli understood the same truth in politics. He warned rulers not to let their soldiers grow soft. An army used to ease will fail at the first sign of hardship. The same applies to your mind. The more you pamper it, the weaker it becomes. Every time you run from discomfort, you surrender a piece of your power. Every time you embrace it, you reclaim control. The harsh truth is this: you cannot be powerful and comfortable at the same time. One will always destroy the other. Diogenes mastered discomfort so completely that it became his shield. He found power in pain, control in chaos, clarity in simplicity. Because when nothing scares you, not hunger, not poverty, not judgment, you become unstoppable. And that's what real strength looks like. Not luxury, not comfort, but the ability to survive without them. Comfort is seductive, and that's why it's dangerous. It will convince you that you're safe when you're actually shrinking. It will tell you that life is about feeling good, not becoming great. Diogenes refused that lie. He chose the hard path, the path of endurance, the path of discipline, the path of self-command. And that path, though it looks lonely, is where every empire of the self begins. When Diogenes walked through Athens with nothing but his cloak and staff, people called him mad. But what terrified them wasn't his madness. It was his mirror. His simplicity reflected their vanity. His lack of desire revealed their dependence. They saw in him everything they had lost: freedom, honesty, control. And rather than confront that truth, they mocked him. Because the truth is, most people don't hate what's different. They hate what exposes them. Machiavelli would have understood this perfectly. He knew that appearances control people. Most men, he wrote, are satisfied by what seems to be, not what is. And Diogenes lived as the exact opposite of that illusion. He cared nothing for how he appeared. He didn't seek approval, praise, or recognition. And that frightened people. Because they couldn't use him, they couldn't predict him. He didn't belong to the social system that defined their worth. By refusing to play their game, he revealed the game itself as meaningless. Every time Diogenes mocked the philosophers, the rich, or the powerful, he wasn't just being rude. He was dissecting society. He saw how easily men were corrupted by comfort and applause. He saw how people built their identities on fragile foundations: money, beauty, titles, possessions. He understood that the more a person needs to appear powerful, the less power they truly have. So he lived in simplicity, not as poverty, but as exposure. The moment he removed all masks, everyone else's began to slip. You see, simplicity is not just a lifestyle. It's a weapon of truth. It strips away illusion, not only from yourself but from everyone around you. When you live simply, you stop participating in the performance of modern life. You stop pretending. You stop competing. And when you do, the people around you can no longer hide behind theirs. They become nervous. They become defensive, because your presence becomes a silent accusation. What are you without your possessions? Without your followers? Without your noise? That's why Diogenes could walk into the grand markets of Athens and laugh. He wasn't laughing because he didn't understand value. He was laughing because he understood it too well. He saw that most men didn't own things. Their things owned them. Their wealth was not a symbol of freedom, but of fear. They couldn't live a day without luxury because they had forgotten who they were without it. Machiavelli would call that the most dangerous form of dependence, the kind that disguises itself as success. Diogenes' simplicity exposed human weakness in its purest form. It showed that men crave not truth but validation. They work not for peace but for approval. And when someone like Diogenes refuses to care, the entire structure begins to crack. His mere existence questioned everything. Why do you need these things? Why do you chase admiration? What are you trying to prove? These were not the questions people wanted to hear, because they demanded honesty. When Diogenes carried his lantern through the streets in daylight, saying he was searching for an honest man, he was mocking everyone. But behind that mockery was a brutal truth. Honesty cannot exist where vanity rules. People lie, pretend, and perform because they are terrified of being seen as ordinary. Simplicity destroys that illusion. It shows that strength comes not from appearance, but from essence. When you live simply, you stop trying to look powerful. You become powerful. Machiavelli might say that Diogenes was a different kind of ruler, one who ruled not through force, but through exposure. He made others confront their own weakness by standing above it. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man alive, approached Diogenes and asked if there was anything he could do for him, Diogenes only said, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." That moment wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. He was showing that all the power Alexander possessed meant nothing in front of a man who needed nothing. That is the power of simplicity. It is disarming. It removes every illusion society hides behind and lays bare what truly matters. Control over oneself. When you live simply, you no longer chase acceptance, so you stop fearing rejection. You no longer compete for validation, so you stop resenting others. The truth about people is revealed in how they react to your simplicity. The strong will respect it. The weak will mock it, but all will see it. Because simplicity, when lived deeply, exposes the truth no one dares to speak aloud. Power has a strange nature. It fears the man who cannot be predicted, the man who is not moved by flattery, who is not threatened by loss, who cannot be bought or manipulated. That man becomes a mystery, and the mysterious man is the most dangerous kind of man. Diogenes understood this to perfection. By having nothing, he made himself untouchable. He lived in such radical simplicity that no one could guess what would move him, because nothing moved him. And that made him free. Most people are easy to control because they are predictable. You know what they want: money, attention, safety, approval. You know what they fear: embarrassment, loss, pain, rejection. Once you know these things, you can control them like pieces on a board. But a man who has detached himself from all of that, who doesn't chase what others crave, he breaks the system. You can't control what you can't tempt, and you can't defeat what you can't read. That was Diogenes, a man so simple he became unreadable. Machiavelli would see him as the most dangerous kind of opponent, the one who has no weakness to exploit. Because all strategy, all politics, all manipulation depend on leverage. You threaten what a man loves or promise what he desires. But what happens when he desires nothing and fears nothing? There is no leverage left. That man stands outside the reach of kings. And that's why Alexander the Great, who conquered nations, couldn't conquer Diogenes. When he approached him with gifts and respect, Diogenes rejected it all with a single sentence: "Stand out of my sunlight." It wasn't disrespect. It was proof of independence. A ruler used to absolute obedience was silenced by a man who needed nothing. Simplicity makes you unpredictable because it removes the strings others pull to control you. Most people live like puppets, their emotions guided by reward and punishment. They are predictable because they chase comfort and flee discomfort. But the man who embraces simplicity, who accepts pain, who stops fearing loss, becomes impossible to manipulate. If you can live without the world's approval, you can move through it unseen, untouched, unbroken. Machiavelli would call that supreme power, to act freely while others are paralyzed by fear. Diogenes' unpredictability wasn't chaos, it was control. He had disciplined his mind to such a degree that he could not be provoked. When people mocked him, he laughed. When they insulted him, he outwitted them. He never gave the reaction they wanted. And that confused them, enraged them. Because when people cannot predict you, they cannot manage you. They lose their sense of superiority. And in that confusion, power shifts. The man who controls his reactions begins to control the room. Simplicity gives you this mastery. It strips away all the artificial layers that make you vulnerable. You stop performing. You stop trying to please. You stop caring about things that don't matter. And suddenly, the noise around you no longer controls your direction. You begin to move like a shadow, silent, focused, and free. People try to label you, to box you, to measure you by their values. But you no longer fit their definitions. You've stepped outside their world, and that makes you dangerous. The unpredictable man terrifies society because he exposes its dependence on routine and approval. When everyone else is desperate to fit in, the man who doesn't care about fitting anywhere becomes a symbol of rebellion. Diogenes didn't just live simply, he made simplicity into a weapon. His unpredictability gave him psychological dominance. No one could insult him because he didn't value their respect. No one could threaten him because he had nothing to lose. And no one could bribe him because he wanted nothing they could offer. That is what true power looks like. Not control over others, but complete control over oneself. Machiavelli would say that unpredictability is one of the most strategic tools a ruler can use. A prince who reveals too much becomes easy to overthrow. A leader who acts according to expectation becomes a servant to perception. The great ones, the truly formidable, keep others guessing. They move when least expected, speak when silence is assumed, and withdraw when the world expects attack. Diogenes embodied that energy, not in palaces, but in the streets. His freedom made him a kind of philosopher, king without a crown, because no one could anticipate what he would say or do next. To live simply is to regain that power. It means you no longer act to impress, you act from intention. You no longer respond to every provocation. You choose your moments. You no longer move out of need, you move out of clarity. The man who lives simply lives on his own terms, not the world's. That is why Diogenes could mock kings, challenge philosophers, and still sleep peacefully in a barrel. His life had no script for others to read. He had nothing to prove, nothing to protect, nothing to perform. That made him unpredictable, unshakable, untamed. There is a lie that comfort whispers to you, that an easy life is a good life. But Diogenes knew the opposite. He understood that simplicity isn't the absence of effort, it's the highest form of control. To live simply is to live with discipline, so sharp, it cuts through every distraction. It is to train your body, your mind, and your desires until they no longer dictate your behavior. That is why the world misunderstood Diogenes. They saw a man who owned nothing, but what they didn't see was the level of mastery it took to own himself. Discipline is born in simplicity. Because when you have fewer things, you have fewer excuses. You cannot hide behind possessions or status or the illusion of busyness. You are forced to face yourself, your habits, your impulses, your weaknesses. And that is the hardest battle a man can fight. Machiavelli would agree the ruler who cannot rule himself cannot rule anything. Discipline, he would say, is the foundation of power, and Diogenes lived that principle more fiercely than any king. While others built temples to the gods, Diogenes built strength within himself. He woke with the sun not because he had to, but because he refused to waste life in laziness. He ate what he could find, not out of pity, but out of control. Every act of restraint was a declaration of power. When he refused luxury, he wasn't being humble. He was being strategic. Every comfort rejected made him sharper, tougher, freer. That's the truth most people can't accept. Simplicity is not passive. It's war, a war against your own impulses. Think about how the world operates today. Everyone wants discipline, but no one wants to strip away comfort to get it. People chase motivation videos, productivity hacks, and instant rewards, but none of that builds real strength. Real discipline begins when everything is taken away, when it's just you, your mind, and your will. Diogenes understood this centuries ago. By removing all distractions, he turned life into constant training. Every hunger was a lesson in patience. Every insult was a test of ego. Every cold night was an exercise in endurance. Machiavelli would see in him the perfect example of what he called vert, the power of the human spirit to shape fate through strength and discipline. A ruler or warrior who masters this never becomes a victim of fortune, because he has prepared himself for every outcome. That's what Diogenes did. He trained for life itself. While others built comfort to shield themselves from pain, he built resilience so that pain could no longer touch him. He didn't seek comfort because he had already conquered it. The problem with comfort is that it makes you fragile. It makes you depend on routines, luxuries, and systems that can vanish overnight. But simplicity, true, deliberate simplicity, hardens you. It teaches you to operate under pressure, to stay calm when everything falls apart. Because if you can function with less, you can thrive with more. That's what people miss when they chase comfort. The more you depend on it, the weaker you become. The more you strip it away, the stronger you grow. Discipline is forged in moments when no one is watching. When you choose hunger over indulgence, silence over noise, work over pleasure. Diogenes was a living embodiment of that principle. He didn't just preach about control. He lived it to an extreme that made others uncomfortable. He didn't need followers, gold, or titles. His self-control was his kingdom. He showed that the most powerful man is not the one who commands others, but the one who commands himself. Machiavelli would have admired that ruthlessness, because self-discipline is not gentle, it's brutal. It requires killing your weaknesses before they kill your potential. It requires denying your impulses until they serve you instead of enslaving you. And simplicity is the training ground for that. When your life is stripped of excess, you start to see what really drives you. You discover how restless, how addicted, how undisciplined you truly are. And from that awareness, real transformation begins. The modern man fears boredom, avoids hunger, runs from silence, and because of that, he remains controlled. He cannot think without distraction, cannot work without comfort, cannot endure without reward. Diogenes was the opposite. He could be alone for days and not lose his mind. He could go hungry and not lose his spirit. That kind of discipline doesn't come from motivation. It comes from simplicity. It comes from the daily decision to deny weakness until strength becomes your only language. Simplicity builds ruthless discipline because it demands that you take full responsibility for your mind. You can't hide behind circumstances. You can't blame the world. You either control yourself or you don't, and that truth terrifies most people. Diogenes faced it every day, and that's why he became untouchable. Because the man who can command himself doesn't need to command others. His presence alone becomes power. His restraint becomes respect. His silence becomes strategy. And his discipline becomes the invisible armor that no enemy can pierce. Power has many shapes. For some, it's a crown. For others, it's gold, land, or control over people. But for Diogenes, power was none of these. His power came from something far more dangerous, freedom. The kind of freedom that terrifies kings, unsettles the rich, and disturbs the obedient. Because true freedom cannot be bought, controlled, or threatened. It is a rebellion against everything society worships, and that, my friend, makes it the strongest power of all. Diogenes lived without possessions, without a house, without social approval, and yet he walked among rulers and philosophers as their equal. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man alive, approached him and asked, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Diogenes simply replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." That single line crushed the illusion of authority. For Alexander, it was a moment of revelation. For Diogenes, it was proof. He needed nothing, and therefore no one had power over him. You see, in the eyes of Machiavelli, such freedom is both brilliant and dangerous. The man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated. He cannot be bribed, blackmailed, or coerced. And that makes him the most unpredictable weapon in the game of power. Because when the world cannot seduce you with wealth, distract you with fame, or control you with fear, you become untouchable. But let us not romanticize this too easily. The freedom Diogenes mastered is not comfort. It is confrontation. It is a war against your own desires, your dependence on approval, your addiction to consumption. The modern world chains you not with iron, but with comfort. The illusion of convenience, luxury, and recognition, all these keep you enslaved. Every new gadget, every social validation, every false need whispered into your ear, they make you weaker. Because every time you need something, you give a piece of your freedom away. Diogenes had understood this centuries before Machiavelli would put pen to paper. He knew that the most powerful man in society was not the one who controlled armies, but the one who controlled himself. The ruler who cannot rule his own hunger, his vanity, his greed. He is no ruler at all. He is a servant in royal robes. But the beggar who laughs at gold, who walks without fear of loss, who looks kings in the eye without bowing, that man is free, and freedom is the greatest throne there is. Now, imagine this in today's world. A man who refuses to chase status, who doesn't care for luxury brands or digital applause, who doesn't need to be constantly seen, liked, or approved. Such a man would be mocked first, then envied, then feared. Because in a society that feeds on insecurity, the one who is content becomes a threat. The system cannot sell to him, control him, or manipulate him. He becomes a mirror showing others their chains, and people hate that reflection. Diogenes became that mirror. He mocked luxury, tore apart hypocrisy, and laughed at those who called themselves free while being slaves to their image. He didn't hate wealth. He simply refused to let it define him. He didn't reject power. He redefined it. He proved that if you can live simply, needing nothing but your own mind, you possess the only power that matters, the power of independence. And this kind of freedom terrifies the world. Because the moment you stop needing their validation, you become unpredictable. The moment you stop fearing loss, you cannot be controlled. Society wants you chasing shadows, status, beauty, applause, so you never see the truth. But Diogenes tore that curtain apart. His life shouted one message to the world: the man who has nothing to lose cannot be defeated. And that, my friend, is why simplicity isn't weakness. It's the ultimate rebellion. It's the quiet revolution that dismantles illusions, the courage to walk away from the world stage and still smile. Because when you live simply, you no longer live as a slave to the world. You live as a master of yourself. Conclusion: the ruthless strength of simplicity. So, what does the life of Diogenes truly teach us? It is not a story of poverty. It is a story of power. Not the kind of power that comes from armies or gold, but the kind that comes from complete inner command. The world teaches you to accumulate titles, possessions, followers. But Diogenes and Machiavelli together whisper a darker, more liberating truth. The fewer things that own you, the more powerful you become. Simplicity is not weakness. It is strategy. It strips you of illusions, reveals who you are without your masks, and trains you to be untouchable. The simple man cannot be humiliated because he values no opinion above his own. He cannot be destroyed because he owns nothing that can be taken. He walks through chaos with the calm of a king who has already conquered himself. The rulers of the world may command nations, but they are haunted by fear of loss, failure, and death. Diogenes feared none of it, and that is why, when Alexander stood before him with all the glory of empire, it was Diogenes who stood taller. So, if you wish to be truly strong, strip away the unnecessary. If you wish to command others, first master your own desires. The world will call you mad, arrogant, detached. Let them. Their opinions are just another chain. Because when you live simply, you stop serving the world's illusions and start bending reality to your will. True freedom, true strength, true power begins the moment you realize you need nothing to be complete. That is the ruthless wisdom of Diogenes, the philosopher who owned nothing and yet possessed everything.